Hey everyone! Today we're going to dive into something pretty fascinating, something that might even be happening in your own kitchen cabinet right now. We're talking about the surprising and honestly often misunderstood science of fermenting honey.
So, picture this. You're making your morning tea, you reach for that beautiful jar of raw honey, twist off the lid, and wait a second. You see bubbles, maybe even a little bit of foam right on top. And your first thought is probably, oh no, has my honey gone bad?
Well, hold on. Before you even think about throwing it out, I've got good news. The answer is almost certainly no. It's not spoiled. What you're actually seeing is a totally natural process. In fact, you could say your honey is just showing you that it's alive.
So, to really get what's going on inside that jar, we need to look at the recipe that kicks this whole thing off. It really just comes down to 3 key ingredients that, when they come together, bring that honey to life.
And here they are, the big 3. For honey to start fermenting, you kind of need this perfect storm of conditions. First, a higher than normal moisture content. Second, the presence of natural wild yeast. And third, warm enough temperatures to really get the party started.
Now, of those 3 things, moisture is by far the most critical trigger. As soon as the water content inside that honey creeps up above about 18%, it creates the perfect playground for fermentation to begin. Which, of course, leads to the most obvious question, right? I mean, how in the world does extra water get into what you thought was a perfectly sealed jar of honey?
Well, the answer lies in this fantastic scientific term, hygroscopic. Honey is naturally hygroscopic, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a total moisture magnet. So if a jar isn't sealed perfectly, or maybe it's just sitting in a humid kitchen, it will literally pull water right out of the air and absorb it. Now this is where it gets really cool. See, raw unpasteurized honey is packed with all these dormant wild yeasts. They're basically just sleeping in there. But as soon as enough water gets in, it's like an alarm clock goes off. They wake up and they are starving. They immediately start feasting on all those delicious sugars in the honey. And the byproduct of that feast, alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. And that gas is what creates your bubbles.
Okay, so now that you're in on the science, you can basically become a honey detective. Let's walk through the really clear, telltale signs of fermentation that you can look for right in your own pantry.
It's a really simple check. You just have to use your senses. First, look. Are you seeing that layer of foam or those fine little bubbles we've been talking about? Check. Second, smell. Go on, give it a good sniff. Do you get a hint of something a little sour, maybe yeasty, almost like bread dough? And finally, feel. Fermented honey will often get much thinner and runnier than usual.
Yeah, that smell is a huge clue. It's often described as a distinct, slightly alcoholic or bready aroma. Honestly, if you've ever baked your own bread or been near beer brewing, you know exactly what that scent is. It's unmistakable.
All right, so we know why it happens, and we know how to spot it. But this all leads to the biggest question of all. Is this a good thing, or is it a bad thing? I mean, is your honey spoiled, or has it actually turned into something special? Well, it turns out the answer completely depends on who you ask.
It's kind of like a tale of 2 very different perspectives. On one side, you have commercial beekeepers. For them, fermentation is a flaw. It makes the honey unstable, you can't really sell it for long-term storage, so it's usually just discarded. But then, on the other side, you have foodies and home brewers, and for them, it's a feature. They see it as a living, probiotic food, and it's especially prized as the perfect starter for making mead, honey wine, because those wild yeasts are already awake and ready to go to work.
So let's bring this all back home. What does this actually mean for that fizzy jar sitting in your kitchen? Now that you know what's really going on, you get to make the call.
So first things first, fermented honey is generally considered totally safe to eat. The biggest difference is going to be the flavor. It won't be quite as sweet, it'll be more complex, a little sour. But the most important thing here is that you're now in on the secret. You know why those bubbles are there.
And that brings us right back to where we started. The next time you pop open a jar of honey and see it bubbling away, you won't see spoilage anymore. You'll see science in action. And you'll have a brand new question to ask yourself. Is this a flaw I should get rid of? Or is it a feature just waiting to be explored?